having me give this presentation and welcome everybody. So this is a talk in the series called Slashes, Spa, and Identification or Not. And the last talk in the series was John Feenstra talking about yellow-bellied kingbirds. And for the next one, I thought, what else has a yellow belly that we could talk about? So sapsuckers it is. Just a little word about nomenclature when we talk about slashes and spas, as a reminder, or for people who didn't see the last ones in the series, is a slash is essentially what you call a bird that you could narrow down to, essentially two different um, species or sometimes subspecies. An example is you see some accipiter very briefly and it flies away and it said, oh, I think it was a Cooper's hawk, but I'm not sure if it's a sharpshinned. Then you call it Cooper's slash sharpshinned. And a spa is a similar idea, and a common use of spa for me. I see gull flock very far away, and I can't tell which gulls they are, but I know they're gulls, and you can write them down as gull spa. So we're on to sapsuckers, and maybe I should start by saying that there are people watching this video, who are watching this webinar, who are much more of an expert in sapsuckers than I am, and I may at some point defer to them to answer questions that I cannot. Um, as I like to say, I'm just the guy who was the sap who was suckered into giving this talk. No, that's not really true. I volunteered for this because I really like sapsuckers. And one thing that I think is very interesting about sapsuckers is that when I first moved here from the east, where the only sapsucker was yellow-bellied, I looked at the field guide and said, "Oh, there's a few more sapsuckers. These look easy in the field guide." And then when you actually go out and start looking at sapsuckers, you find out that they don't all look like the ones in the field guide. They don't look nearly as clean and nearly as distinguishable among species. And in fact, sometimes it seems that most of them don't look as clean as what they look like in the field guides, rather than just a few individuals that look a little bit dirty. So there are 4 species of sapsuckers that are currently recognized, and this number has changed multiple times in the past because the taxonomy has not always been agreed upon, and it probably still is not agreed upon. If anybody has strong opinions about whether certain sapsuckers should be lumped again, that should be independent of this talk. I'll just treat them as separate species, but if they get lumped again, they're separate populations that can still be field identifiable, like myrtle warblers and Audubon's warblers, which are now considered the same species. So it's still useful to and instructive to think about the different populations of sapsuckers. So one thing that's interesting about sapsuckers is that they have a unique feeding style, where unlike other woodpeckers, they make little tiny holes in a tree, and the sap wells into the, and usually a live tree, and the sap wells up in the holes, and they lick the sap and also get bugs that are attracted to the sap. And this is what the holes look like. This is a tree that has been visited by sapsuckers, and you'll see you have these little tiny holes that are in rows here. And so this is a good sign that a sapsucker is present. And many of you probably have noticed that there is indeed a sapsucker present in this photo. It's right here, if I can circle it with my mouse. So you can see that sapsuckers can sometimes blend in and can be very hard to see. And not only that, but when they see you, they'll scurry around to the other side of the tree and climb up to where there's leaves or needles so that you can't see them. So we're going to start off with a few polls just to gauge people's understanding of sapsuckers. And for those of you who are on the live stream, or are watching this on YouTube later, you won't be able to see the polls. You'll be able to see the questions. You'll be able to see the images that are the questions for the polls, but you won't be able to fill it out. And the answers, they're all multiple choice, and here are the choices for each poll, and they will all be the same. So let's move to the first poll. And this first poll is a photo that I already showed, and I'm going to give people a little bit of time to answer it. It would be accompanied by Ron Seiger on saxophone. All right.
All right. Well, that's
poll one, and we won't look at the answers to the polls yet.
Okay, actually, we still have a couple of votes still coming in.
Okay.
I think slowing down, actually. And now it's slowing down to a trickle. Let's give them a couple more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, that's it for this poll.
Okay, that's it for this poll. Let's go to the next poll. And also, another rendition of Ron on sax.
I think Alex Trebek is rolling over in his grave right now.
I think he's rocking in his grave. I think he would very much enjoy this if he were around.
And I think that just about does it. We're going to end this poll. And okay.
Next poll.
Oops. There we go. Here you go.
Okay.
Now Alex is rolling over in his grave. Okay, a few more seconds. And the poll is... there we go. The poll is ending. Okay.
And let's do
the fourth one.
Poll number 4.
Okay. Now Alex is rolling over in his grave. Okay, I know there's a few more votes out there. And 3, 2, 1, and that's it.
Okay, and there's going to be 2 more of these.
Okay.
Poll number 5. Each one of these, the sonogram is getting a little bit higher.
Okay, and 3, 2, 1, and that's it for that poll.
Okay. And survey number 6.
There we go.
Sonogram went the other way this time.
Little Von Williams,
All
Longboard
right.
Jeopardy. And polls closing. 3, 2, 1, and that's it, Mark.
Okay. Well, we will go back to those polls in a little bit. And for now, let's talk about some of the sapsuckers. And I'm going to go through the 4 currently recognized species. And first, where to find them, um, and then something about how to identify them or not. So let's start with Williamson sapsucker. This is the easiest one to identify out of all of them. Less confusing with the compared to the others. Williamson's is mostly a high elevation breeder, and you can see that this huge area in the middle of the Rockies are someplace where it breeds, and then it winters all the way down through Mexico. In California, there's a breeding range through the Sierras, and also in our local mountains in the San Gabriel, San Bernardinos. And the winter range in Southern California is a little bit spread out from the mountains. They don't always stay up at high elevations. So I have on the left an eBird map, May through August, of Williamson sapsucker in Los Angeles County, with a little bit of Orange and San Bernardino on that you can see on the right. And you see that the Williamson sapsucker is all confined here up at the high elevation where they nest. And if I go to the eBird map for October through March, you still find some in, kind of high elevations, but they've now moved down a little bit to the desert, down to the coastal slope, and there's scattered records around in various places that are lower elevation. So Williamson sapsucker, if you're around Southern California, it's a bird that you want to look for up in the mountains if you're in the summer, and then in the winter at a little bit lower. So Williamson sapsucker is very interesting because the female was described first as thyroideus, which is basically because of the black-breasted woodpecker. And the male was described later and named after Williamson. And it wasn't until several years that it was realized that these 2 different birds were actually male and female of the same species. And Thyroideus won out because it was the first one described, and so that's what we have now. So identifying Williamsons is straightforward compared to the other sapsuckers. The male has the all black back with the white head stripes and the red throat. All of the sapsuckers except the female Williamsons have a white stripe on the side of the wing there, and you can see it in flight. The female is a little bit more difficult, not really compared to the other sapsuckers as much, but you can imagine that the largest confusion would be with non-sapsuckers. You can think of northern flicker, or if you're in the right location, Gila woodpecker, if you happen to be someplace where say in the winter you might get some scattered Williamson sapsuckers in a place like around Phoenix where Gila woodpeckers are found all the time. I could see that as an identification not a challenge, but something that people might get tripped up on. Williamson's has the bars all the way underneath the body, unlike say flicker or or Gila woodpecker and the black breast and yellow belly. So here's survey 2. So survey 2, Ron, can you put up the results of survey 2? Okay, good. And we had 80% saying that this is a female Williamson's sapsucker, which is what it is. And a few people said yellow-bellied. Sapsucker spa is always, nobody's going to go wrong if they say sapsucker spa. So if you don't know, that's the right thing to say. And yes, it does have a yellow belly, but all the sapsuckers have yellow bellies. Yellow-bellied, it's kind of a strange name actually, yellow-bellied, because out of these are very striking, beautiful birds, and there's a lot of features that you could have named it instead of the belly. But this goes with what Larry Allen's rule of nomenclature, that whoever named the bird is looking at it upside down, sitting in a tray. So that's why these things get named what they are. So fantastic. So Williamson's sapsucker for the first one. So red-breasted sapsucker. So red-breasted is a very much coastal Pacific species. I mean, not exactly on the coast. You could see from the map here, but it's more coastal than the other ones. It's not quite as migratory, and the northern subspecies, I believe, doesn't migrate very much at all, if at all. I mean, maybe a little bit in here. Again, red-breasted in Southern California is a bird that that you find in the summer in the breeding grounds. You'd find up high in the mountains. And in the winter, it expands and fills out a lot of locations, especially on the coastal slope. So on the left, you'll see an eBird map. This is the red-breasted sapsucker May through August. And you'll see, again, just like the Williamsons, it's pretty much confined in the mountains, not quite as much. There's a few little dots in other places, but mostly high elevations. And if I go to October through March, you'll see that they are all over the place. And red-breasted sapsucker, if you're in the winter in the Los Angeles area, this is your default sapsucker that you're going to see more often than any of them. So that's the one to expect if you expect any of them. And red-breasted has had also like yellow-bellied and red-naped, they've been lumped and split multiple times, and they may be split again. It's now considered its own species. Okay, so what does a red-breasted sapsucker look like? So the entire head, throat, and breast are basically red. It's like a hooded look. Male and female are pretty much the same, although the males have a little bit more red than the females, but it's something that you really, it's kind of hard to tell. I'm not sure if I want to really identify red-breasteds by sex in the field myself. They have a blacker back. You'll see on the next photo that with whitish columns down the back. And you'll see that on the next photo. There's two subspecies of red-breasted sapsucker. The northern one, Ruber, which is shown here, this was in Oregon, it basically breeds from somewhere around Oregon, further north. There's not a really sharp dividing line, but it has white just a little bit above the bill, red pretty much everywhere else, has less white on the back than Daggett, the other subspecies, and a deeper red color. Um, the other subs, and by the way, some field guides might illustrate only this subspecies, which can cause some confusion when you see the other one. So here's this is Daggett. This is the southern subspecies, and this is a more ruberish version of Daggett, much more red one. I'll show you another one later that has more markings, but this one, this little white area above the bill extends into a little bit of a moustachial stripe, and the back has a bit more white in the two white columns than Ruber does. And let me and by the way, Ruber, they're essentially what you're going to get in Southern California is going to be Daggett. You're not going to find Ruber, although there are some records here and there. I think there was one in San Diego this winter of Ruber. Let me show you another Ruber by Larry Sansoni, and this one has even more of a white moustachial stripe, and it also has a white postocular stripe here. And this is perfectly fine for Daggett. And here you can see the back a little bit better. So the back is black, and then the modeling on the back basically forms two whitish columns. And these whitish columns are thinner and smaller in Ruber, and sometimes a little bit yellowish in Ruber. Okay, so that's red-breasted sapsucker. Just for completeness, I want to mention something about red-breasted sapsucker juveniles. Here's one in June in the San Gabriel Mountains. They're very dark brown body feathers, and they're starting to get some of the characteristics of an adult. A little bit of a red cap, and you can see that little Daggett stripe there. And the white wing patch that you have on all sapsuckers except for the female Williamsons. But one reason why I put this on here is that these guys molt very quickly. They molt on their breeding grounds, and by the time they're ready to move around, they're in essentially adult plumage. So the only time you're going to see these juveniles is in the summer on the breeding grounds. And if you see one in the winter, it's not going to look like this. And this will be important when we get to, in particular, yellow-bellied sapsucker, which has a different molt schedule. Okay, so now let's do survey 6. Let's see the results for survey 6.
There you go.
There we go. Okay, Williamson's red-breasted, blah, blah, blah. So we have most people said red-breasted, 63%, which is fine. That this is a red-breasted. A few people said red-breasted / red-naped, which is putting in a slash is always fine if you're not sure. This one does have a little bit of stripes on the back, but this is perfectly normal for Daggett to have the little white moustachial stripe here and the a little bit of a white postocular stripe. If this were a red-naped, as we'll see later, there would be black in between the red crown and the red nape on a red-naped. And a few people, I guess the second most common was hybrid, and it's hard to, I can't say definitively that this does not have any hybrid there could be some, a little tiny mixture of red nape. That's really hard to tell, but this is fine for a red-breasted Daggett. So I wouldn't see any reason that we would need to call this a hybrid. So fantastic. So red-breasted is what most people had down. So everybody's doing pretty good here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, red nape sapsucker. So red nape sapsucker was mostly considered a subspecies of yellow-bellied sapsucker for most of the history, although people have debated this back and forth since the beginning, as with all three of the red-breasted, yellow-bellied, and red-naped. It's a bit more migratory. You see that this is a kind of a Rocky Mountain type bird, right? So it breeds up here in the Rocky Mountains up in the north, and winters down into Mexico. And there's very few places, a little bit in southeastern Arizona, a little bit in Texas and New Mexico, where you can find red nape sapsuckers all year round. In Southern California, this is a winter bird. So I'm not going to bother showing an eBird map of red nape sapsucker in LA County in the summer because it's empty. So this is a winter bird that you'll find, or you may find in Los Angeles County during the winter months. It's never going to be nearly as common um, as red-breasted sapsucker, but they're around every year. There's a few of them around that you can find. So what does red nape sapsucker look like? So let's start with the adult male. So true to the name, unlike the yellow-bellied name, which they all have, the red-naped sapsucker usually has a red nape patch, but not always. Sometimes they could lack the red nape patch, just right here. The male has a fully red throat, and the border around the red throat is not complete. So that means that the red here is touching the white on this mustachio stripe. Um, Sometimes there could be some little bit of red around this ear patch, which is shown on this particular individual has red here. Sometimes it doesn't. They don't have red here, and the adults have a black breast, which is kind of hard to see. Not quite as hard to see as the belly, so don't look for bellies most of the time because it's pushed up against a tree. There are many better ways to figure out sapsuckers. Um, and also the white on the back, similar to red-breasted, is mostly in two vertical columns. It's hard to see on this one. It's a little bit easier to see on this individual. So here's another individual. This one doesn't have any red on the ear patch. It still has a red nape, still has a red throat, and the black that's surrounding the red is incomplete, and the red is touching the white right here. And the back pattern, here's one of the uh, whitish columns, and here's another one that you can only partially see with black in the middle. And let me emphasize, I'm going over all of these various field marks because each one of them is, is a little bit, is not completely definitive, right? You can find some red nape sapsuckers that might not have a red nape, or some that might have a little bit more black here, or some that might have a little bit messier back pattern. And so you really want to look at multiple field marks in order to figure out what your bird is. And sometimes the answer is a slash or a spa. Sometimes you just don't know. Okay, so that's the adult male. Here's an adult female, which many aspects are very much like the male, has the red nape patch. This one, the white stripes on the back, these vertical columns, there's a little bit more messiness in between than you see sometimes. So this isn't quite as divided into two columns as some of them, but it still is pretty much. Um, the difference between the male and the female is that the throat usually is red on the bottom part, and then it gets white at the top with some clear division between the red and the white. And then the black that's bordering the throat is complete. It's a thick black border here between the red and the white of the mustachio stripe right in there. And sometimes this is what makes some of these difficult, is sometimes the female has as much red on the throat as the male does, and then that can make things extremely difficult. And sometimes that would just have to lead to calling something a spa or a slash, which is perfectly acceptable. Okay. And I actually don't have a photo of a juvenile red-naped sapsucker because I'm not usually any place where juveniles are, which is where red-naped sapsuckers would breed. So I stole this out of the Sibley guide. And much like the um, red-breasted sapsucker, it's more brownish, not quite as dark as the red-breasted, but not as pale as the yellow-bellied, which we'll see later. But again, I wanted to show this to emphasize that
Oh, I think we had a freezing there.
the black breast, they'll have a little bit of a
Mark, you
yes,
froze there for a second, so if you can go back to the beginning of
I
that
did. Oh
paragraph.
no. Okay. What was the last thing you heard?
um, Definitely that you don't have a picture of a juvie.
Okay, I good. I was going to panic and say, and you were going to say the last thing that you heard was you playing a saxophone. That would have been okay. So here's a juvenile that I took from the Sibley guide, and it's um, not quite as dark as the juvenile red-breasted sapsucker, but paler than the than the yellow-bellied. But the main reason why I wanted to include this is that just like the red-breasted, these molt into adult basic plumage very quickly on their breeding ground, so that by the time they're leaving and coming to where we are in the winter, they don't look like this anymore. They look basically like adults, except some of them might not have their adult black breast until somewhere around January. Depends on the bird. They might have kind of a brownish mottling just on the breast, but otherwise look like adults. And again, that's going to be important for yellow-bellied. Okay, so here is survey 3, which is going to be a red-naped sapsucker, but let's see what people said.
Okay, here you go.
Okay, good. We had 61% on red-naped. The red and the nape really kind of gives it away, but you also see the red is it's kind of hard to see because there's a branch in the way, but the red is touching the white here, and the back pattern looks like there's some black in between the two column. So this is reasonable to say red naped. And the folks who said yellow bellied slash red naped or sapsucker spa, that's also a perfectly good answer, because usually if you see something like this, you say, okay, I want to go around the other side of the tree and get another look, and make sure that there's not anything weird going on in the parts of the bird that you can't see. So good. So here we have a red-naped.
Okay.
And that was a red-naped male. I should have pointed out. Here's survey 4, which is also going to be a red-naped.
Okay. There we go.
And okay, we have just under half saying red-naped, and we have a few hybrids for red-breasted red-naped, a few hybrids for yellow-bellied red-naped, and a few slashes and spas, and the slashes and spas, of course, are right. And so this one here, this is a female red-naped, and it has this this classic throat pattern where you have the bottom of the throat is all red, and then the top of the throat is white up by the chin with the black border. And also the back pattern looks pretty good for red-naped with the two different columns. So this one I'm going to call a red-naped as well. Alrighty, let's see. Okay, now let's go to yellow-bellied sapsucker. Yellow-bellied was the first to be described because it's an eastern bird. So colonists who came over would see them regularly. They're the most highly migratory of all the sapsuckers. As you could see, they winter all the way down into the Yucatan and a little bit even further, and in the Caribbean, and they breed all the way up into the boreal forests, sticking all the way up here into Alaska. Kind of reminds me of some of the eastern warblers that you think of them as eastern warblers, but if you look at the boreal forests, say Blackpole or something like that, they extend all the way out into Alaska. Um, so yellow-bellied sapsucker is the rarest of the ones that we find in Southern California. It's a winter vagrant. You don't see it anywhere on the range map on the right. But every year there are one or two of them that are around in Los Angeles County alone, plus in neighboring counties they also show up. So it's one that you want to look for and be aware of because they are around. And here on the left is an eBird map of yellow-bellied sapsucker in around LA County, and you see that they're essentially low elevation, and all of these dots are in the winter. So that's when you're going to look for yellow-bellied sapsucker. Okay, let's go with the adult female on the yellow-bellied sapsucker. Um, so unlike the red-naped, the female will have a female yellow-bellied will have a completely white throat, but like the red-naped female, will have a complete black border around the white throat. There's usually no red on the nape, but apparently some of them can show red on the nape sometimes, which again, this makes things very difficult. Why you This is why you want to go by multiple field marks. The back pattern on yellow-bellied is more messy than on red-naped. You can see a bit of two columns, but in between, it's really the two columns are pretty wide and messy with little golden whitish flecks in between. Um, so this is a female red-naped sapsucker, or sorry, female yellow-bellied sapsucker. I'm sorry, I misspoke. And we'll see a few more photos in a little bit. Here's an adult male yellow-bellied sapsucker. And again, so just like the female, it has a complete black border on the throat, but this time the throat is red. Usually it doesn't have any red on the nape, like this one. And this one is a really good example of a messy back pattern. It's really hard to even see two rows on this particular individual. And so some of them really look like this with this, just a complete messy back. So those are the adults. Here's the juvenile. So this photo was taken November 15th by Larry Sansoni in Riverside County. So this is absolutely not on the breeding grounds. And the young yellow-bellied sapsuckers have all these little golden brown juvenile feathers around the face and on the throat and the back, and even on the head you see some red here, but it's interrupted by all these little golden brown juvenile feathers. And the key thing about yellow-bellied sapsuckers compared to the other ones is this first pre-basic molting into basic plumage, adult-like plumage the first time. That's extended all the way through the winter. So yellow-bellied sapsuckers are going to look like this through part of the winter, and as the winter progresses, they're going to molt into adult-like plumage. And that gives you a really nice clue for identifying anything that looks like this, is that if you happen to be in the winter, in some place that's not, sapsucker breeding ground. Well, it's in the winter, so it's not. And you see a buffy brown sapsucker that looks like this, it's a yellow-bellied, because the red-naped and the red-breasteds would have already molted into adult plumage. So just to show you that molt, I was sent these photos by Robert McNabb, who's this last winter has had a yellow-bellied sapsucker at his house, and he has photographed it multiple times through the winter, starting in December, going all the way up through March. And so you can see the progression of the molt of this juvenile yellow-bellied sapsucker. So this is December 6th, where you see a lot of this brownish, golden brown color on the entire face and on the forehead, interrupting the red on the forehead. And this is now December 20th, and it still looks roughly the same, maybe a little bit more of a black malar stripe here coming in, and a little bit of black on the breast, but still a lot of brown buffiness all over. And you can see the back pattern is also pretty messy on this one, which is good for yellow-bellied. This is January 1st. Looks not that much different. It's only a week or two later. By January 31st, this same bird is looking much more adult-like. Now, there may be a little bit of buffiness left, but this malar stripe here is completely black, and this mustachio stripe is completely white, so everything is looking much more like an adult by the end of January. And on March 1st, this same bird looks like this, which may have a little bit of fuzziness around, smushiness, I guess, around the breast, but essentially it looks mostly like adult plumage without any of these little brown flakes anymore in the head, like it had earlier. And this one has a completely white throat, and it's getting and this white throat is surrounded by a black border. This tells you that this is a female yellow-bellied sapsucker. So it's kind of cool to be able to follow one individual through the winter as it undergoes its molt. So let's go back to survey number 1. And let's see what people said for survey 1. Okay. So here we had 48% on yellow-bellied, and the next highest was Williamson's. I could see why, because Williamson's female is kind of brownish, and then the third most common was Sapsucker spa at 20%, which of course you can't go wrong with if you don't know what it is. So Williamson's would have more of a barred appearance, black and white bars on the back, like a Gila woodpecker, a red-bellied woodpecker, something like that, rather than this very messy back pattern. And this individual has all of these golden brown feathers all over the place, from the head all the way through the back and the neck and so on. That indicates that it's not an adult. It's juvenile that's molting in undergoing its pre-basic molt, and in January that rules out red-naped and rules out red-breasted. So this is a juvenile yellow-bellied sapsucker, or a second year, because it's January, yellow-bellied sapsucker. Fantastic. So most people have gotten that. So I wanted to show a few more comparisons between red-naped and yellow-bellied, because that, at least to me, seems to be the most difficult of the two. So here on the left is a adult male red-naped, and on the right is an adult male yellow-bellied. And so the things to look for are, of course, the red on the nape of the red nape, but also the throat that's all red. That's where the red is touching the white. There's no complete border. Whereas on the yellow-bellied, the throat is also completely red, but you have a thick black border around that red throat. Also, you can't really see the back on the one on the left, but the one on the right has a very messy back pattern. So just as a another reminder of the differences between these two. Let me also say that this particular individual is probably one of the cleanest red napes that I've seen around LA County in terms of looking most like the field guides, where it doesn't have that much you know messiness in terms of feathers of the wrong color in the wrong places. Let me go to this next pair where you have a yellow bellied on the right with the red throat surrounded by black and the messy back, and a red naped on the left. So this one is a little bit more tricky. It does have a bit of a red nape, and you see the back pattern has the two different white columns with black in the middle. Um, the border on the throat is a little bit thicker than I would really like. If you look closely, you could see that it is broken right around here where the red goes in and touches the the white, but this is a little bit problematic. This is one of these birds that poor Kimball got an email from me in 2013 or whatever it was. Hey, what is this? Uh, and sometimes when you see a bird like this, uh, the best thing to do is you know get good looks, get photos, ask somebody who knows more about it than you do, and put it down as a spa or a slash until you can figure it out. But there are enough characteristics like the red nape, the back, and there is a little bit of breaking here that in the end we were calling this a red nape, but calling this um, a spa is of course perfectly acceptable. And here are two females. The one on the right is a yellow bellied with a messy back, white throat, and black border on the white throat. And the one on the right has a less messy back, more the white is in two different columns, and it has the red naped female pattern of the red at the bottom of the throat, white at the top, um, and the full black border. Okay, another thing that you might see is hybrids, especially between red-naped and red-breasted, where there's a pretty large area where both species occur and both nest in the same area, and hybrids are actually quite frequent. So how do you tell a hybrid? Well, generally, it's not some of them are more obvious than others. For the obvious ones, what you see is something like this, where you have a face pattern that's very much like a red naped, where you have some just black and white with no red, but then a lot of red invading that whole cheek area, not just a little spot on the cheek, but all the way up from the throat to the nape. And you don't really see much black in between the crown and the nape there. A red nape should have, red on the crown, red on the nape, and black in between. Here, kind of the red covers this whole area. And the other thing that you see is on the breast, there are a whole bunch of red feathers all over the place, as well as the black feathers. So you shouldn't be seeing any red feathers on a red nape sapsucker on the breast, but that's perfectly fine for a red breasted. So here's an example of something that at least I would feel okay um, calling a red-breasted red-naped hybrid. And and there are some locations where where a large number of them are hybrids. So now let's look at survey 5.
There you go.
There we go, and we have 62% on red-breasted, red-naped hybrid. Oh, you guys are good. Okay, and the next highest was 21% on red-breasted, and only a few on red-naped. So yeah, this individual looks mostly like a red-naped again, in terms of where the large stripes on the mustachio stripe. But if you look at the breast, you see red like a red-breasted, and you see a lot of black like you would see on a red-naped. So this one again looks very much like a hybrid to me. So congratulations to people who have hybrids, and people who have slashes. Of course, that's always right as well. Because it's never wrong to say, I don't know what this is, and I'm going to go and ask somebody who knows more than I do. And Kimball will attest that I've done that multiple times with sapsuckers. Now I want to go to a few even more confusing individuals that just to illustrate some of the problems and how difficult they could be sometimes. So this is an individual that Chris Dean photographed, and if you look at the one on the right, you see that it has no red nape, and it looks like it has a red throat that has a full black border that's surrounding it. And so you might want to call this a male yellow-bellied sapsucker. However, if you look carefully, there's a little bit of white at the top of this throat. And in the middle photo, you can see it a little bit better. That there's just a little bit of white on the top of the throat. And that's okay for red nape sapsucker females, to have that, just a little bit of white at the top. And so the difficulty here is a yellow-bellied male versus a red-naped female. And this one, the little bit of white, is suggesting that this is indeed a red-naped female that doesn't have a red nape. And also it had two stripes. This photo, you can see a little bit of the two uh, vertical white columns on the back. But this is a tricky one. This is one of them that that I would have gotten as many photos as I could and send it to Kimball. Um, that's and put it down as a spa or slash, probably a red-naped yellow-bellied slash. That's one confusing individual. Here's another one by Naresh, which I think is even more confusing. Um, this this one also looks like it has a full red throat that's surrounded by black, like a male yellow-bellied sapsucker. This one doesn't have any white on the throat. You see the red going all the way up. Um, However, if you look at the back pattern looks like a red naped, but it doesn't have a red nape. So this is one that I would I just say, help, what's going on? This is a slash. Apparently, a large number of experts have looked at this bird and have concluded that this is a probable male red naped. One thing that I'll notice is that the black border is a little bit broken right here, not completely, but it's not really a thick black border all the way that you would expect in yellow bellied. But again, this is one that I would um, you know, note the various features and put it down as a slash and say, help somebody, what do you think this is? And get as many photos as I can. So this has been judged by the experts as most probably a male red nape that happens to not have a red nape, and has a little bit too much black, kind of like the individual that I showed you before that did have a red nape that that had a little bit more black on the border. And then here's confusing individual number 3. Okay, this one is weird because everything about it, except for the red on the throat, looks like a yellow-bellied. It has a nice messy back pattern. It's not really in 2 columns. Maybe you can see a little tiny black in there in between, but not really in 2 columns. It has mostly a white throat with a black border. It has no red on the nape. And now the question here is what is this bird? And this is one that's in at least this last winter. I don't know if it's still there. It's been in Laguna Niguel Park in Orange County. And I think there's still ongoing discussion about this. Most people are leaning towards a yellow-bellied that has a little bit of red feathers on the throat, which apparently they can have. The thing that I don't like about yellow-bellied is that if this was a female red-naped, the place where the red would be on the throat would be at the bottom. So one could make an argument possibly for a female red-naped, or this might be an individual that we never figure out what exactly it is. So anyway, this one currently I believe is in eBird mostly as a yellow-bellied, and I think the verdict is still out on this particular bird. So this is just showing you some of the difficulties that you can get into with yellow-bellied versus red-naped sapsuckers. Okay, now I want to switch gears a little bit because we've talked about what they look like. We didn't say much about what they sound like. So I want to play a few sounds, and the first sounds that I want to play are the drumming sounds. So many woodpeckers will. This is not the pecking of their little hole sound. This is a display that many woodpeckers will do, kind of like a song in many birds to announce their territory, attract mates, and so on. It's a drumming display where they pound on a tree or sometimes aluminum siding or whatever to try to make a lot of noise. And the drumming of red-breasted, red-naped, and yellow-bellied are all similar, and they're not really distinguishable, but the drumming of Williamson's is different enough that you can actually distinguish the species by sound. So let me now try to do this with a Williamson. So I'm going to try to show a sonogram while playing the sound. So I'm going to momentarily stop screen sharing and re-screen share with a, let's see, which one is this? Okay, with the Williamson sapsucker. And let me play the sound. Can people hear that?
Yes, we can,
Ron?
Mark.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
we can.
Good. So what you should listen for is that the sound comes out in several bursts, where each burst is several pecks, and the first burst has many more pecks in it, so it's a longer, wider set of bursts, and then each burst afterwards is kind of evenly spaced, not the pecks within the burst, but the pauses from one burst to the next are evenly spaced and rather slow. And so this is a Williamson sapsucker. Let me do it one more time. Okay, now let me um, do the same thing for a red-breasted sapsucker. Okay, oops. All right, now you should see a sonogram for a red-breasted sapsucker. In this case, you have an initial burst again, but the burst afterwards are usually only one or two pecks together, and if it's two, it's so close together that you only really hear one. And they're faster and they're more random, kind of, like they don't have rhythm, like the guy in the marching band that couldn't get the left foot first type thing. So let me play that. And it kind of slows down a little bit at the end. So you hear a burst and then a bunch of rather fast taps that are slightly out of sync, or slightly random. Okay, so that's a red-breasted. And red-naped and yellow-bellied sound the same as that red-breasted. So let me again go back to here, and now I'm showing, I want to just mention that one more time. Let's see. If you look at the sonogram, you could see that for the red-breasted, the taps, they're something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a little bit more than 5 per second. And if you look at the Williamsons, you see that the different bursts, there's something like 1, 2, 3 per second, like 3 or 4, so it's slower. And that's how you can tell from the drumming sound. Another sound, the most common sound that sapsuckers make is a mew call, and unfortunately, this call is pretty much indistinguishable between the different sapsuckers. But it's good to know the call, so you hear it and you say, "Hey, there's a sapsucker over there. Let's go and figure out what kind of sapsucker it is." So I'm going to play some red-naped and red-breasted sounds. Stop my screen share for a second. And come on. And share it on another sapsucker sound. Okay, click on share. So now hopefully you should see a sonogram. This is the mew call. This is the mew call of a red-naped, but they sound the same. And this is a sound that they'll often make when you find sapsuckers in the winter. Play it again. Okay, so that's the mew call. I'm going to play another mew call just to show you the variation, because the mew calls don't all sound the same. Let me find that another mew call. Okay, this is a red-breasted sapsucker mew call. It sounds similar to the other one. It's a little bit more burry, but that's just variation. It's a little softer. Not quite as smooth as the other one. Okay, so that is a that last one was a red-breasted sapsucker, but again, the two aren't really distinguishable by that by that mu call. But it's a good call to know, so that you can know that you're actually hearing a sapsucker. Okay, so now I'm getting towards the end. I want to put up a few more surveys to see if how people do on some of the later um, the later birds here. So survey number 7, I'd like to put up and see um, if people identify this correctly.
There you go.
So here is survey number 7, and I guess I have to put on a Jeopardy theme from Ron again.
Was that the yellow-bellied or red-naped theme? I can't recall.
Well, let's find out if that's the yellow-bellied or red-naped theme.
Okay, a few more seconds. Get your votes in, even if you're not sure. There's always Sapsucker Spa down at the
There
bottom.
always is, and thing about sapsucker spas, you can't be wrong.
Okay, here we go. 3, 2, and 1. All right.
Okay, well, let's see what
What we have?
does
Okay.
yes, what does the survey say on that one? Fantastic. We have most people, 75%, saying yellow-bellied. A few have some slashes and some spas. So this particular individual, if you look at the crown, you see a lot of brown on the crown where it's mostly brown and not really red yet. So this indicates juvenile plumage. Um, in this particular individual, a lot of the red has come in on the throat already, but not on the crown. Every individual is a little bit different, but having juvenile plumage or juvenile feathers still surviving in mid-January in Southern California, that pretty much nails it as a yellow-bellied. So here we have um, a young yellow-bellied sapsucker, and this looks like it's going to be a male because it already has a fully red throat coming in with that full black border.
Great.
So great. Let's do survey 8.
And there we go.
Okay. Now I have to play. Oh, that was the
That was
yellow
the,
belly theme before, so
yeah,
I
there you go.
have to play a different theme this time. Or maybe I don't have to play a different theme.
Okay. Well, let's get a few more answers in. There's always Sapsucker Spa. And we're ending in 3, 2, and 1.
Okay, let's see what we have for this one. Okay, we have 85% saying red-naped, which is that's great for this one. So this is a female red-naped sapsucker. It does have a little bit of red on the nape. Has the white throat at the top, red throat at the bottom, and the back is divided into 2 rows. So this is really good for red nape. Um, a few have hybrids. I don't see any reason why this would be a hybrid. Sapsucker Spa, of course, is always right. That's the theme. You're not going to be wrong if you call it a spa and say help. Ask somebody else for help. Okay, let's go to survey number 9. Survey number 9 is a sound. and I'm going to play this sound. This time I'm not going to play a saxophone thing because you want to hear the sound. This is going to be a drum, and just like the Wizard of Oz, I will say, pay no attention to the mountain chickadee in the corner. So the thing we're listening for is the drumming sound, not the chickadee. Let me play it again. Maybe I'll do
And
it
the
a
votes
third
are
time.
coming in. And let's get those votes in. That definitely sounds like a mountain chickadee to me.
It does. There is a mountain chickadee there, well, but we're listening for the tapping of the sapsucker.
Okay. And I think most of the answers are in. The polling is ending in 3, 2, and 1.
Okay, what do we have? And 68% Williamson's, fantastic. And then the second most is Sapsucker Spa, which of course is always right. So looking at the sonogram, this has the characteristics of Williamson's. It has a large burst at the beginning and then very evenly, maybe not quite as evenly spaced, but very well separated slow bursts. This one is even slower than the example that I played before, where here you have maybe only 1 or 2 bursts per second. So much slower than any red-naped or red-breasted sapsucker would drum. So yes, this is a Williamson sapsucker recorded by Lance in the San Gabriels. Let's do survey number 10. This one I can put on a saxophone theme.
Or not.
Or not? Did you not hear the saxophone theme?
That was my very quiet one, I guess. No,
Oh,
we
okay.
didn't. We didn't hear it out here.
Oh, you did not.
No, no, or at least I didn't.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure it was very good though.
Well, it was your
Whoops,
sax theme.
we just lost. We just lost the picture of the sapsucker.
Oops. Okay. Um, and I just lost my thing that says share. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we
That's
can still
interesting.
hear you, but we do not have a sapsucker up right now.
Okay. It's telling me that Zoom is not responding.
Ah.
I have a little thing saying Zoom is not responding. What the best thing for me to do is maybe I should disconnect and reconnect.
Uh,
Can I actually do that?
you can do that. And in the meantime, can I share the poll results?
Sure, you could show. How about you show? Yeah, share the poll results.
Okay, here are the poll results. And for that brief burst of a view we had, it looks like 69% of us thought it was yellow-bellied sapsucker. A few Williamsons and a few sapsucker spuzz. I'd like to say this reminds me of a joke, but I don't think I should. Okay, here is Mark.
All right, I think I'm back.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Okay, let me get my screen share back in order. Um, and share this thing.
And do you see the poll results?
And I also see the poll results. So it
All
looks like
right.
70% said yellow bellied. And that's great. So this is a female yellow bellied with a completely white throat, with a black border and a messy back. People who said sapsucker spot, of course, you're always right. Um, again, if you see something like this, it certainly doesn't hurt to walk around the other side and follow it around the tree and try to get a look at the nape, and try to see the rest of the throat and so on. Never hurts to get a better look at the bird.
All right.
Oh, good, yellow bellied. And this is the last survey. Like Spinal Tap, my surveys go to 11.
And here's the poll.
And I don't even know if I can play a Jeopardy theme. I'll try it and see if it still works.
Uh-oh.
I don't know what happened with my Zoom. Can you hear it?
Yes, we can. All right. And a few more seconds. Get your votes in. 3, 2, and 1. Poll is ending. And here are the results.
Okay, this one's more interesting, more divided. So we have the largest is red-breasted, red-naped hybrid, with 52%, and red-naped with 41%. And I agree, this is probably the most difficult one on the of the surveys. This particular individual was in this weird place called Markleyville, which I had never been to before. I was there the day after a yellow-breasted warbler was there, but there was this cool sapsucker, so that was our. So we didn't get the yellow-breasted warbler, but we got a cool sapsucker.
Your
This one,
consolation prize.
the consolation prize. So this one, look. Let's see if I can find my mouse here. So this one looks, mostly like a red-naped, with the full red throat that touches the white. But one thing that you'll notice about it is that there's a lot of red, not just a little red on the cheek, but red going all the way up through the supercilium. A lot of red in the back here, and also some red showing up on the breast. So this is a tough individual, and this is one that we debated around a little bit, and eventually had called it a hybrid, as especially because of this red that's showing up in various places on the breast, and a little bit too much red um, around the cheek. Um, and but those who said we'll call this a red nape, you know that's very very close. This is more red nape than red breasted, and I don't really know where to draw the line in terms of where do you call it a hybrid and where don't you. Like for oyster catchers, there's this gel scale that that you could use, that of course it's not perfect or anything, and it was meant to be used on specimens in the first place, but at least that gives you some uh, you know some standard that people can agree on. We need something like this for sapsuckers, um, to be able to tell whether these things are hybrids or not. But otherwise, putting it down as a slash is perfectly fine.
Great.
All right, and so that was a survey going to 11, and I think that's basically about it. I want to thank everybody. In particular, I want to thank folks who sent me photos or sounds, or that I grabbed out of sounds, mostly I grabbed out of Zeno Canto, and photos from everywhere. Um, a really good reference is this article by Shunk, the first reference that I have here. I have already linked it on the web page to this webinar, and there are many other places where you can find interesting tidbits about sapsuckers.
Well, Mark, that was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome.
And we did have a few questions, if you don't mind.
Oh, of course.
Do you want to read them, or should I read them to you?
Maybe you can read them. Let me
Okay.
stop the share for right now.
Okay. The first question is from Jan Wilson. And Jan says that I learned that when this is referring to the red naped that had the little red smear.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that when there's a black smear, and she actually meant a red smear breaking up the auricular patch,
Mm-hmm.
that this is a sign of a hybrid. Is that true?
Um,
And
Breaking up. I mean, so maybe somebody else. I'm thinking about John Dunn in particular, who knows a lot about sapsuckers, but other people may too. At least according to Shunk's paper, he claims that having the little bit of red in the auricular is perfectly fine for red naped.
oh,
Um,
okay.
that's what that's the claim in his paper. I don't know if anybody has anything else to add to that.
Uh, Sean, or you can put in chat, or he may, or if you're still there, I could bring you forward. Let's see if I can find John. There's John.
And when we're talking about the red auricular, let's see if I can find
Okay.
that. I have a
Okay, John,
slide that has it.
are you there?
I am.
And do you? I'm using my phone call on you.
Yeah, here's an individual with the little bit red in the auricular patch.
Well, that's so slight, but in general, I think red-naped and red-breasted are such poor species. One of the weakest of things called species, that any evidence of like red on the side of the face, that's usually more than that, would be questionable. But normally you see a little bit of red on the face, and you might see a red tinge to the lower breast. There's often slightly more signs. And since I don't really think they're good species, back crosses are routine. And eventually you get enough, and you're not going to be able to tell what's a back cross 3 times removed from a hybrid. This one in particular, I probably wouldn't even have noticed the red there, but I don't see anything else that's wrong for red naped.
Great. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Um, okay. Calvin Bond asks, how would you be able to distinguish a red-naped times yellow-bellied hybrid? How do you think that the Laguna Park bird could be a hybrid?
Oh boy. So we do know that such hybrids exist. I mean, there are records of them. Um, and again, maybe John could answer. I'm not sure how you would identify one in the field because there's so much variation. Um,
I would have called the Laguna Park bird certainly a potential hybrid.
Yeah,
I've seen one bird like that, except I had a blacker
this
back
one
down
here.
on the Algodones Dunes,
Mm-hmm.
but that had a slight, but that back doesn't look like a perfect yellow belly to me. There's a little too much dark in there in places. And the red, red on the lower throat's a sure warning sign. So what's wrong with just calling it SPA?
Yeah, I know. That's what I would call this as a SPA or a slash.
Thing have to be forced into a cookie cutter and say, well, that could fit within the range. Well, who knows if it fits within the range? It could easily be a sign of a hybrid, or just say I'm not sure, and identify the 95% of the ones you do see that are much more standard, and just let birds go. There's no harm in being unsure, rather than have to say, oh, that for sure is this. When, the hybridization of these two, I think, is in Alberta. It's certainly less frequent than red-breasted red-nape, but that's not much of that's a damned with faint praise comment. So I'm sorry to rant, but
and you touched on one of the themes of this whole series is that sometimes you have slashes and spas, and you just call them slashes and spas, and that's why I put up this bird, because this is one that I would call a slash.
While I have you, Mark, can I make a couple of other comments? I put it in. I never figured out what the chat or the teach me, but you know me with technology. I'm still in my caves and around the Mediterranean.
That's okay. I had Zoom crash out during the end too. So
actually, John, before you get into these comments, Kim Moore, I'm not sure about the last name, asks, what is a back cross? You mentioned that in your comments.
Question to Mark or me?
To either of you, I think.
Go ahead, John.
So a back cross, it's a second generation or more hybrid. So you have a hybrid that back crosses again, hybridizes again. When I was taking biology, you learned that hybrids were infertile. That's been thrown out with the bathwater, and they'll hybridize again. And if, depending on what they hybridize with, you'll get a bird that looks potentially purer than it looked originally, which could be roughly 50-50. Some hybrids are studied ad nauseum, like Ken Parks with the blue-winged golden wing, and the tendency for the recessive characters to show in second, third generation hybrids that would not show in the first generation hybrid.
Ah, interesting. Yes, thank you very much. I wasn't for clarifying that. That was great. And while I have broken your rhythm here, Bella Lou asks,
broken the kind of like the drumming of a sapsucker, where the rhythm is kind of broken.
Bella Lou asks, what was the justification for splitting the red-naped and yellow-bellied sapsuckers? Oops, I just lost.
Oh, I'm gonna throw this one at John. If you don't mind, John.
Bella actually goes on to ask, also, I'm a little surprised by how many species don't follow the biological species concept.
Well, that's an intelligent question. That's probably, though, the subject of a whole seminar that could go on for weeks. So let me answer the first question. They were lumped up into, I may be wrong on this, but I think they were lumped in the 50s. So by the 5th edition of the checklist, it was yellow-bellied sapsucker. And then they got gradually resplit. I think red-naped and red-breasted were split first, maybe 82 in a supplement. And then eventually they split yellow-bellied from red-nape. So initially it was red-breasted, and then yellow-bellied and red-naped as another species. And then they finally split yellow-bellied from red-naped. Williamson's has always been split once they got their act together and realized males and females look so different. But that was done 170 years ago. But it's a lot of it was Ned Johnson's work with Carla Cicero on a few of the papers. And just sort of felt there were enough pure birds that indicated that somehow the hybrids were selected against. But I know here, well, we see mostly red-breasteds, but I say here in the Owens Valley, I'm as likely to see a red-breasted, red-naped hybrid as I am a red-naped. And since there's no difference in calls, drum, the plumage maturation, I just think they're really borderline as species. But things change, like the Warner Mountains used to apparently have mostly red napes, and now it's almost all red-breasted. So I don't know what's going on. That's in Northeast California. Can I add just a couple of other comments?
Sure.
Or do you want me to wait?
Well, one more follow-up. Bella goes on to ask, following her previous question, if hybrids and back crosses are both viable and fertile, why are they considered separate species? Kind of obvious.
Well, that's an excellent question. And I think in the sapsuckers, it's very borderline. But I don't think, the fertile business, it's the percentage that are fertile, I suppose. And whether you have a hybrid swarm in the area or whether you have just a few hybrids, that indicating that there's mostly assortative mating taking place, which means they're normally selecting their own kind, which under the biological species concept would be an acceptable reason to split them. And I don't know if the sapsuckers would measure up for that. And it would be in the areas of contact, of sympatry, if that makes sense, of overlap.
And you had some comments also, John?
I did, of course. How could I not have comments?
Of course. I would be disappointed if you didn't have comments.
Oh, it's as you get old and curmudgeon-y, you just can't contain yourself. But it was an excellent talk, Mark.
Oh, thank you.
So, but I just wanted to correct a few things, and one is they have nothing to do. But the map you showed of red-naped shows breeding down to the Davis Mountains of West Texas, and I had my textbook handy, and there's one bird that was found in. Yes, you see the purple you have down to the Davis Mountains.
Yes.
There's one summer record of a male and breeding. I think it's a male and breeding condition from the Guadalupe Mountains on the New Mexico line, but there's no evidence of breeding in Texas, period.
Oh,
okay.
That's just an error, and that's totally trivial, but more interesting.
Right.
And then one of your birds that you called was okay, I think, for a red-breasted. I wasn't convinced. I thought it could be a hybrid, red-breasted, red-naped, or a back cross, because I couldn't see, the red looked restricted on the throat and had some black in the lower cheek.
Okay, do you remember which one that was?
Well,
it
was one of your quiz birds.
Was it this one?
That's that one, which you said fit within a red-breasted. I'd call it more likely a hybrid, or a hybrid back cross. But if you look at the black in the rear of the auricular, that red is just, it doesn't get very far past the eye. And I can't see the breast very well, but it looks to me that the red's mainly in the throat. And there's some white that's sort of showing in the nape area. And I was uneasy about calling that a red. And then the only other one, you have a image labeled red-naped sapsucker adult, and it's clearly got a mottled brown breast, so it's one of those first winter birds, and that's the best way. On red-naped sapsuckers in the fall, they're really easy to age just by looking at the breast, because it's solid with some greenish edges. And your bird that you have labeled as adult is a
let me see if I can find this one. Is it this one here?
Well, that one, for instance, I don't think so, but that is an immature. So that's not an adult male.
Yeah.
Because you'd have a big black breast below that. Maybe you have two that are off. But that's an easy way that everyone could look to age red napes.
Red naped, yeah.
Oh, great.
Anyway, if I was too critical, but
Oh no.
No, it's a good experience all around.
Yes.
Ken Ely asks, similar to the range of yellow rumped hybrids in Canada, is someone looking into a similar range for hybrid sapsuckers?
I think we know where a lot of the range is of hybrid sapsuckers, right? So Alberta for hybrid yellow-bellied red-naped, and a large area. Let's see if I can find a map. Red-breasted, essentially, all around, this area in here for red-breasted and red-naped. So the areas, are mostly known, and people have been studying them. John I'm sure John knows more about this than I do. I know that there's, they even had a project in Alberta where they were asking people to go out and try to identify hybrid yellow-bellied red-napes, and giving them scorecards to write down, what the back stripes looked like and what the throat looked like, and stuff like that.
well, Ned Johnson, the most experienced, the guy who looked at it the most, has sadly passed. So he's not looking anymore. I don't think there are any active studies, but that jogged me on something you said about Ruber versus Daggett. Of all the marks I've looked at, the belly is yellower on a Ruber from a Daggett. But what I like best is the back. Not only are the pale markings much reduced, but yes,
yeah, you can't really see it on the back, but yeah, the little bit of yellowish. Yeah.
So the back is black, but the color of those markings, they really are pretty strongly yellowish on Ruber, and pretty usually whitish on Daggett. And you're quite right that Ruber's, it's casual in Southern California and probably Central California. You get to the Oregon border and you start seeing more Rubers, and Rubers, certainly the ones in Alaska, are pretty strongly migratory. So it doesn't surprise me that there are few that get to Southern California. All the ones in Alaska, of course, are all Ruber. And red-breasted hybridizes with yellow-bellied too. It's a big hybrid mess.
Did I lose everyone?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. If there are no more questions, I just want to thank Mark Scheel for that wonderful presentation on slashes, spuzz, and identification, or not. I don't want to I don't want to go too long, but don't forget that next month we have 2 more webinars coming up on the 2nd and 3rd Tuesday of the month. If you'd like more information, please go to our website at www.labirders.org. And a lot of people are writing in to say, great talk, Mark. And I agree. It was wonderful. Thank you very, very much. And thank you all for joining us.
And thank you. And thank you, John, for your wisdom and comments afterwards, too.
You're
always
so
appreciated.
We really appreciate it. And with that, we will see you next time. Thank you all for showing up.
Yep, thank you.
Bye-bye now.